All right, things didn't go as planned last night. You didn't get the girl. You did get way too much booze in your system. So now here, Saturday morning, March the 11th, 2023, you are trying to dry out. You got the Pedialyte. You're cooking up some eggs and bacon, get some grease in your system, trying to start to feel alive again. And you know the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0 is here for you. Yes, it is time for your Friday night hangover cure here on Saturday morning. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, glad to have you aboard flying solo this week. Dave is on vacation, the conquistador, enjoying himself. Good for him. So you're stuck with me. But you're going to get the same reviews, the music, the TV and streaming, the movies, and of course at the end, the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. So let's get into it, shall we? As always, we start off with rock and roll. It's time for our music reviews and some news. Our featured album review this week is the new album from Godsmack, Lighting Up the Sky. 11 tracks. We've heard rumblings and rumors, and of course, Godsmack. If you listen to social media and fake news, this is it for Godsmack. This is the last album. Their tour is not selling. They are on the outs. I don't believe it. With the paucity of good rock bands out there, I find it hard to believe that people have abandoned Godsmack all of a sudden. So here we go. Let's review Lighting Up the Sky. 11 tracks. Of course, here in the past, Dave and I have reviewed the first single, Surrender, and the second release, You and I. Now, while Dave's not here, and I'm sure he'll play catch up with this next week, we did discuss this album here recently. Both listened to it in the early stages and compared notes, and we kind of agreed that Lighting Up the Sky is very soft in the middle. And you guys know I've talked about some of these bands as they get older, they lose their edge. You can cite anybody from Metallica to, of course, here with Godsmack, where as you get older, you get more introspective, more thoughtful. You look at the end of the road and mortality, which we get a lot of here towards the end of the album, Lighting Up the Sky. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a limit to how much you should shave off your edge. Let's put it that way. Now, the Conquistador and I did agree, as we talked, that the bookend songs, Song 1 and Song 11, are fantastic because they are the perfect examples of how a band like Godsmack can tone it down just a little bit. Just back it off a little bit. We're not getting the screaming, angry awesomeness of the first album. But at the same time, track 1, You and I, and track 11, the title track, Lighting Up the Sky, show a little bit of growth, a little bit more nuance, a little bit more, should I say, tunesmanship. It's the best of both worlds. These songs rock, but at the same time, they do show a little bit more maturity without going overboard. So, obviously, from what I'm saying here, you can tell the best songs on Lighting Up the Sky are the first and the last. In between, as I mentioned, a lot of weak stuff. Now, at the beginning, it's okay. You get some generic, what I would call generic Godsmack, but still pretty good. So the second song, which I find very interesting, on the surface, a very jingoistic, "Let's Go America" type song called Red, White, and Blue. Now, musically, of course, it's straightforward, meat and potatoes, rock and roll. But there are a couple of lines in there, some lyrics that I question. Not saying they're positive, negative, but early on in the song, Sully Erna, of course, the primary force lead singer for Godsmack, mentions a world going black. Now, of course, you take it at its face value. He's saying things are dark, things are desperate, but you've got to be careful with how you put things nowadays. We all know that. So when I hear a world going black in a song that is jingoistic about rah 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 for the red, white, and blue, I get a little bit, tiny bit uncomfortable with that. And you guys listen to this podcast, for the most part, I'm a pro-America guy. Let's put it that way. I think our strengths are far better. They far outweigh our faults. Unfortunately, we're letting the few, the idiots, the woke, steal that away from us. But at the same time, there are problems. And so that's why I'm torn on this song, Red, White, and Blue, because you get a line like that, which is subject to interpretation. And then later on, you get a line saying, "The lies keep ringing true." So is that a condemnation of the media? Is it saying the media is maybe kind of possibly right, even though in the end they're not? Again, another tricky line subject to interpretation. So I will choose to take Red, White, and Blue at face value. It is a simple, fist pumping, straightforward rocker saying America's great. So if you want to go there, it's fine. It's a good song. Just don't read into the lyrics any more than you have to. And then after that, the album for me really kind of falls apart for a while. Surrender, the first single, is good. Not great. It's what I would call generic Godsmack. There is a little bit of a breakdown towards the end where they bring the tempo, they bring the volume down a bit. That's the best part of the song, where Sully Erna is talking about, "I really need a break from you." Best part of the song by far. So Surrender's okay, not bad. And I'm at this point, 3 songs in, I'm okay with it. The album as a whole is good. What About Me, song 4, still not bad. Still not bad, but again, it reeks of being quote unquote generic Godsmack. And then we go through a whole bunch of stuff that is alternately wussy, wimpy, bland. Truth. Oh, yeah, it's just to me a wussy song. And this is another example, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, of a band that is losing its edge. We don't need a piano. We don't need strings. Yes, the guitar solo in the song is great, but it is a fine, fine line to walk if you are a hard rock band. And this goes all the way back to the 80s, the era that I love. You put together that power ballad or that slower tempo song, you better hit a home run with it because you will alienate most of your fans if it comes off as wussy. And later on, there's another song. We talked about mortality, the exploration of mortality as these bands, the band members get older. There's a song called Growing Old. Again, more piano. Ugh. So in the end, Lighting Up the Sky is not terrible overall, but Godsmack really hasn't put out what I would say is a great album in a long, long time. They've become a band that's good for 2 or 3, maybe 4 songs per album now, as opposed to their first few albums where it was beginning to end consistently solid rock. So I will give Lighting Up the Sky 2.5 frenzies, the barest of recommendations. And we'll see next week what the Conquistador says as he plays catch up. I don't think we're going to have an album review next week. I think we're going to review a lot of songs, a whole lot of songs. I'm holding off on Metallica's third single off of 72 Seasons, If Darkness Had a Sun. I'm going to hold off on that till next week so the Conquistador and I can review that together. But I cannot wait to talk about the new song from Extreme. Yes, we talked last week about the new album 6, which is coming out June the 9th. But I have listened to the first single, Rise, since it came out a little over a week ago. I have listened to it dozens of times. It is fantastic. It is so good. It is ridiculously good. Nuno Bettencourt, lead guitarist, sounds like he is channeling Eddie Van Halen in spirit. And of course, he has already said in interviews that when Eddie Van Halen died, that was kind of an inspiration for him to step up his game. And if Rise, the first single, is any indication of what we're going to get on 6, we are in for a treat. Rise is the best of both worlds, pardon the pun. Pardon the allusion to Van Halen, of course. Gary Cherone, the gentleman, the mature, awesome singer that he is, will never disparage his brief time with Van Halen, but he is better suited for Extreme. I always thought Van Halen 3 was vastly underrated. I always loved Gary Cherone. I kind of wish we could have seen a little bit more in terms of where that configuration of Van Halen could have gone. But again, I think Gary Cherone works better with Nuno Bettencourt in the boys in Extreme. Rise, again, a face melter, in my opinion. And Nuno Bettencourt, some of his best, if not his best, guitar work ever. 4 frenzies for me for the leadoff single from Extreme's new album, their first album in 15 years. Once again, 6 will be out June the 9th. Cannot wait. Cannot wait for 6 from Extreme. And one other thing. If I didn't mention this last week, if I did, I'm sorry. I'm repeating myself. You do that when you get older. But it makes me a little mad. And it makes me a little upset that we've had to wait this long for new music from Extreme. And if it's because Nuno was playing guitar for Rihanna, that's a travesty. That is a major rock and roll faux pas. He should be embarrassed and ashamed. Now, I'm sure the paychecks are good. I'm sure Riri pays very well. When you play for her, I'm sure she pays well. But I'm sorry. If I had a band as awesome as Extreme, I would be in the studio or on the road nonstop, creating music, reaching out to the fans. So in that sense, as great as Nuno Betancourt is, especially on Rise, little bit upset with him for making us wait this long because he was playing down, in my opinion, down multiple levels for a paycheck with Rihanna. Okay, as I mentioned, songs next week. Not an album, but songs. And it's looking like it's shaping up to be a very interesting year here in music. We're 2.5 months in to 2023 with the news about Extreme. We've got new music coming from Matchbox 20 in a couple weeks, and an album coming soon after that. Now we get the first new song in over 2 decades from Billy Squier. Yes, Billy Squier, the rock and roll legend. Vastly underrated. Premiered the song this week on Eddie Trunk's Sirius XM show. Inspired by the situation with Roe versus Wade. Now, I have listened to this song once. It is not overtly political, no matter what his driving force was behind writing this song. All that matters is it got him in the studio, it got him writing music again, and he says there might be more coming. It feels like his muse has opened up again. The new song from Billy Squier is called Harder on a Woman. You can check it out on Spotify or all the other, I imagine, streaming music services out there. It's 6 minutes. It doesn't necessarily feel like 6 minutes. It goes by a little quicker than that, although it is a bit repetitive. And I think they could have done with a little bit more production in terms of pumping up the volume levels, especially on the guitars. But we'll have a full review for you next week on the weekend edition. New Billy Squier song, Harder on a Woman. And then if that wasn't enough for all you 80s geeks out there like me, Winger is back. Yes, of course, Stewart on Beavis and Butt-Head is ecstatic. Winger is not the joke that everybody thinks they are. If you listen to their last 2 albums, you would know they have refined their sound, they have toughened their sound up, they've got better lyrics, more creative songs, harder edge songs. That is why I am looking forward to their new album, out May the 5th. Now, again, like Extreme, not putting a lot of thought into the album titles. So Extreme's new album is called 6. Winger's new album is called 7. So there you go, kids. Out May the 5th, the new Winger album is 7. And the first single off that album is out as you're hearing this. It hit on the 10th of March. Proud Desperado is the first single off of 7. We will have a review of that for you next week on the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. So that's going to about do it for segment 1. But I do want to slip in, we do talk about books on occasion. I know you sit there and you go, oh my God, here we go. Number 1, pick up a damn book once in a while, okay? Stop burying your head in your phone, playing stupid games on your phone. Put down the PS4, the PS5 controller, or the Xbox controller, and pick up a damn book once in a while. Books are better than movies. Books are better than TV shows. You get more detail. You get the story straight from the source, the author right to you. Nobody in there to muck it up. No actors. No corporate heads at Warner Brothers or Universal or Sony. And of course, one of our favorite authors, one of our favorite characters, Lee Child and Jack Reacher. The series is not slowing down. And of course, we know the first season of the Amazon Prime series with Alan Ritchson was a huge hit. Season 2 coming soon. But the book series, again, not slowing down. Coming out October the 24th of this year, 2023, The Secret is the latest Jack Reacher novel. Of course, over the last few years, I don't know why, I don't like it. We've seen it with other authors. He's letting his brother, in this case, co-write the books with him. I guess he's preparing, hopefully not to die, but I can't think of any other reason why he would do this. Clive Cussler did this with his Dirk Pitt novels, brought his son in. And of course, now Dirk Cussler writes the Dirk Pitt novels. So similarly, the Jack Reacher novels now being co-written by Lee and Andrew Child. Again, the latest one, The Secret, coming out October the 24th of 2023. And that will do it for our first segment here on the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. Next up, television, streaming. Talk about Poker Face as it winds down to the end of season 1, a magnificent season 1. We'll also talk about the start of season 2 of Perry Mason on HBO. Hulu's History of the World Part 2, Mel Brooks finally revisiting the story, the humor that he set up back in the early 80s with History of the World Part 1. And then we have news on Beavis and Butt-Head, The Punisher. So hang out here, quick promo. I will be right back. When the mindless zombies at the major sports networks won't leave you alone. When the forces of evil on local sports radio have you cornered. Load up the boomstick known as Sports Frenzy 2.0. Available on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, and Castbox. Kevin Dave will drive the dull and boring voices in your head away and offer you the sports salvation you need. New episodes drop every Thursday. And don't forget the weekend edition every Saturday, where the Maestro and the Conquistador might just review your favorite horror flick. Sports Frenzy 2.0. It's groovy. Hey everybody, welcome back to segment 2 of your Friday Night Hangover Cure. That is right, this is the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0. Flying solo this week, I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Taping here on March the 9th, 2023. This will hit Saturday morning, the 11th. But you already knew that. We covered that in segment 1. TV and streaming. Let's discuss some of the shows that are out there right now, some of the headlines when it comes to future shows to look forward to. Now, you guys know each and every week, Dave and I have been talking about Poker Face on Peacock. And today, as I tape this episode of the weekend edition, the season finale has hit. The 10th and final episode of season 1 of Poker Face has arrived. Have not watched it yet. Hopefully Dave will catch up by next week and we'll be able to give you full reviews of the entire season. Season 1 of Poker Face. It has been phenomenal. Much needed quality television. An homage to the old school NBC Sunday murder mystery movies, McMillan and Wife, and McCloud and Columbo. Natasha Lyonne, of course, great as Charlie Cale, the human bullshit detector. Now, episode 9, I've watched the penultimate episode. I believe Rian Johnson, actually, the creator of this, of course, the man behind Knives Out and The Glass Onion, actually directed episode 9, featuring Joseph Gordon-Levitt, one of my favorite actors. And again, does not disappoint. I can't say there's been a bad episode yet. The only thing that I'm worried about is the ongoing storyline that's kind of been bubbling and simmering underneath the surface with Benjamin Bratt, of course, going all the way back to the first episode with Adrian Brody. So we'll see what happens with that here in the season finale. And we will discuss more, of course, as I mentioned, next week. Give you a full season 1 review of Poker Face on Peacock. Now, a couple new streaming shows that have popped up here over the last few days. Second season on HBO of Perry Mason. Episode 1 hit this last Monday. Of course, season 1 was great. This is not Raymond Burr. This is not the old school Perry Mason per se, although a lot of the characters are the same. Della Street, Paul Drake, although they have been changed to, of course, check boxes. But in this case, it doesn't bother me all that much. The show is so well done, so well written, as I've always said, and Dave would most likely agree with me. There's not an issue, there's not a problem if you're going to force a gay character or you're going to force a quota on us when it comes to race, when it comes to sexual orientation. I still think it's ridiculous that you force a creative mind to create characters to fit a certain political party stance or to make sure that the quota is being met. That's not how creative minds work. I'm telling you, that is not how it's supposed to work. And the fact that Hollywood is forcing this on shows like Perry Mason, to me, is an ultimate travesty. But again, as we've talked about here recently, we're rewriting books because, of course, we don't want the snowflakes to get triggered or upset. So, again, that being said, Perry Mason has been a gem, has been wonderfully done. And first episode of season 2 did not let me down as we start on a new mystery. Matthew Rice, of course, married to Kerry Russell. Those two together did a phenomenal job in the FX series The Americans, which was just great. Now he takes over here on his own as Perry Mason. Definitely, again, not the Raymond Burr spit and polish, suit and tie, always perfect, never rumpled, never bothered, always calm, cool, and collected. This is not that Perry Mason. This Perry Mason is troubled, a war veteran, haunted by demons, drinks too much, disheveled, but of course he has a brilliant legal mind buried somewhere underneath all that angst. So now season 2 kicks off with a mystery involving a young rich man who is overextending himself in trying to create a legacy for himself out in Los Angeles, most notably trying to bring a Major League Baseball team from the East out to the West. Yes, of course, the show is set roughly around the same time frame, maybe a little bit earlier even than the original Perry Mason. I will leave the rest of it for you to discover on your own. Watch Perry Mason. Get in now while you can. If you haven't watched season 1, you probably should. You don't need to have watched the old Perry Mason show to get in on this, but there is enough in there referencing season 1 where you probably do want to rip through that real quick to give yourself some background before you jump into season 2. And then Hulu. I am not a huge fan of Hulu. I have it because I get it for basically next to nothing. But there's really not a ton on Hulu that I get into. Again, anything that Disney touches to me turns to shit. As you can tell by the current reactions to the last few Marvel movies, especially Quantumania. And of course, Disney is a big shareholder in Hulu. So again, I'm not a Hulu person, but this was one of the few shows that I was looking forward to on Hulu because although I will say other people are more beholden to the comedy church of Mel Brooks. I know that's kind of an awkward, pretentious way to put it, but I know a lot of people who can't get enough of Blazing Saddles and Spaceballs and Young Frankenstein, and that's fine. They're okay. They're good, depending on which one you're talking about. My fondness would go towards Young Frankenstein. And I believe when I mentioned this show, which is, of course, a follow-up to Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1. I think I might have made a slight misstep by saying this was the last Mel Brooks film project that I remember being released back in the early 80s. Of course, there were a couple other movies that came out after that. Now, Mel Brooks has not done a lot of work since the 80s, but for some reason, I forgot Spaceballs came out after History of the World Part 1. And then, of course, you had Robin Hood Men in Tights. So you have to give me a break there. That's forgettable. But anyway, History of the World Part 1 came out in the early 80s. And now Hulu has Mel Brooks' long gestating follow-up, History of the World Part 2. They've been releasing episodes daily since it debuted this past Monday. So pretty much by now, all episodes are out. As we tape here again on Thursday night, the 9th, and by the time you hear this on the 11th, definitely believe all episodes are out of History of the World Part 2. I have watched the first 2 episodes. Now, featured players in History of the World Part 2 include Ike Barinholtz, who I do not find funny in the least, Nick Kroll, who I used to love when he was on the league, but now he has come to really irritate me over the last few years, and I'm not really finding him all that funny either. And then, of course, you got to throw in another completely unfunny human being in Wanda Sykes. So, yes, I'm already off to a bad start here with History of the World Part 2. Now, what I will say about the first couple episodes is there are a couple per episode, 1 or 2 very, very, very funny moments. I'm not the kind of person that laughs out loud when I'm watching comedy. If I laugh out loud, that means we are talking knock down, drop dead funny stuff. I can find something amusing and humorous without actually laughing at it. I know that sounds odd, but so there were a couple moments in each of the first 2 episodes where I did laugh out loud. There are some in-jokes in there. The problem I have with it so far is that, number one, the humor, this is going to sound terrible, and please forgive me, but you have to take it in the context that it's meant to be received in. Let's put it that way. I'm not Jewish. And a lot of Mel Brooks humor is very, very, very Jewish oriented, Jewish centric. So it just goes over my head. I don't get it. I'm not living that lifestyle. I didn't live that lifestyle. So, and he's always kind of been like that, and that's fine. He embraces his religion, and that's good for him. But if you're not Jewish, I don't know how you're supposed to really understand the humor in a lot of instances. But beyond that, some of the ongoing skits, there are some skits that carry over through the episodes. The Civil War is one of them, with Ike Barinholtz playing Ulysses Grant, and it's just an ongoing joke, beaten to death, that, oh, Ulysses Grant was a drunkard and he's always looking to get some whiskey. Okay, we get it. We get it. We get it. We got it the first 20 times you mentioned it, Mel. We got it. There's marginally funny stuff involving Rasputin, and of course the Bolsheviks. So we'll see where this goes. I am not promising. Like last week when I told you I was done with The Last of Us. Sorry, I know everybody loves it. Everybody praises it beyond belief. It is, to me, nothing but a PC retread of The Walking Dead. I don't find it creative. I really don't find it all that engaging. Again, I just find it, again, Hollywood trying to force political agendas into these scripts, into these stories, instead of just letting them flow organically. So we'll see. If I stick with History of the World Part 2, I'll give it an episode or two, and we'll talk more about it next week. I am working on finishing up Chris Rock's Netflix live comedy show from last Saturday. Of course, that would have been March the 4th. Selective Outrage. I really have no excuse for not finishing it. It's only an hour long. I just got tired and wanted to go to bed. I was watching it actually Sunday night. Didn't watch the live airing of it, but I'll tell you one thing. Chris Rock, he is brutally honest, and I admire that about him. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. He is coming at you with both barrels. And again, he is brutally honest. And that's, again, what I love about him. So I'm looking at finishing up Selective Outrage. So hopefully I'll have a review of that for you here on Sports Frenzy, the weekend edition, next Saturday. All right, some news in TV and streaming. Star Trek Discovery is going to end with season 5 in 2024. Of course, you guys know, if you've listened to this podcast over the last few years, I am a Star Trek guy, not a Star Wars guy. So I know, blasphemy. I'm not watching The Mandalorian. I'm not watching The Bad Batch. But I will say this. I watched 2 episodes of Discovery and gave up on it. You want to talk about political agendas, and I hear Picard is the same way. Snowflake writers, woke writers, again, trying to force political ideas and thoughts and agendas into writing where it doesn't belong. Nobody's saying you can't bring social ideas into these scripts. The original Star Trek did a great job of that, an unbelievable job of it, without being heavy-handed and without offending half the audience with their heavy-handedness. Discovery is a travesty. And yes, I know, I'm saying that only based on watching 2 episodes, but I've read reviews, seeing did I miss the boat? Did I miss something? Does it get better? And from what I've seen, the overwhelming majority of the reviews say the same thing. They say this is nothing more than a sign of the modern times, where a bunch of woke writers are getting in a room and trying to push, again, political agendas. So bye-bye, Discovery. Not soon enough to see you fly off into the sunset in the galaxy or go through a black hole and never bother us again. Now, of course, I have said Star Trek Strange New Worlds with Anson Mount as Christopher Pike, phenomenal show. Because they finally realized maybe we need to go back to our roots and give people a show that harkens back in its spirit in its writing, in its acting, back to the original Star Trek. I cannot wait for season 2 of Strange New Worlds, but Picard, Discovery, bye-bye. Go away. Now, as we bid farewell, not a fond farewell, but farewell to Discovery and Picard, great news as we welcome back, no, not Gabe Kapler, not Mr. Cotter. It's going to be a year, but Jon Bernthal is going to return. It has been confirmed by multiple sources. Jon Bernthal is going to return as Frank Castle, a.k.a. The Punisher, in Daredevil Born Again on Disney+. And of course, Daredevil was one of those great, great shows that Netflix had based on Marvel characters years ago. Of course, you had The Punisher, you had Daredevil, you had Luke Cage, you had Jessica Jones, you had Iron Fist, and of course, the Defenders. So it's great, great news that The Punisher will be returning under the Disney umbrella. That scares me a little bit. But again, this Daredevil Born Again series, it's taking a while to get it going, put it together. Now, it is going to be a longer series. Thank God for that. I believe 18 episodes. But we will not get that until spring of 2024. And then we've got a looming writer's strike, so hopefully the scripts are all done. But I could not be happier that Jon Bernthal is back as the Punisher. Also returning, April the 20th on Paramount Plus, Beavis and Butt-Head, Season 2. Cannot wait for that. The first season was fantastic. Yeah, sorry. I kind of tend to align myself more with Beavis and Butt-Head instead of stuff like Coda or Parasite or Nomadland. I do actually like to have fun once in a while. And Beavis and Butt-Head, in its own way, is brilliant. So feel free to join me April the 20th as we check out Season 2 on Paramount Plus of Beavis and Butt-Head. Then finally, on a scary note here to wrap up segment 2. You guys know I tend to sneak my wrestling news in here on the weekend edition. Since it's not technically a sport, there can be an argument made that there is definitely athleticism involved, but since it's scripted, I wait until we get to the weekend edition to discuss the headlines and the news in the world of wrestling, much to Dave's chagrin. Well, scary moment here this past Tuesday on NXT. Of course, NXT is on the USA Network. It is kind of like the minor leagues, the developmental league for the WWE. And I would say probably 25 to 30, maybe even 40% of the wrestlers on NXT will eventually make their way up to the big leagues. You'll see them in WrestleManias in the future. You'll see them on Raw and SmackDown. The current women's champion, of course, we talked about the scandal recently here with Mandy Rose and how she was fired from NXT because of her racy pictures, her subscription service. Of course, WWE claims that they own her image and likeness rights, and she is not allowed to tamper or do anything to that likeness or image to denigrate or damage the WWE or NXT brand. So she was written out, basically. And Roxanne Perez, young Roxanne Perez, who I really don't like. She looks like she's 12 years old. It's kind of creepy. But Roxanne Perez beat Mandy Rose for the NXT Women's Championship late last year in 2022. She had a match this past Tuesday at NXT Roadblock with Miko Satomura. I don't believe this was fake. If it was fake, shame on NXT and WWE, because we've seen things like this in the past where a bad guy or, the villain, the heel, man, woman, whoever it might be, will come out after a match or after the bell in the ring and, assault their opponent to the point where, like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack, oh, my arm, it's broken, it's broken. And they wheel out a gurney and have a couple people come out and put a cast on or put a neck brace on. So again, this is a very, very tricky tightrope that they walk with this stuff. But by the reactions from the people at ringside, by her opponent, Mako Satomura, after the match was done and Roxanne Perez had won, she basically collapsed in the center of the ring. The good news is, by all accounts, she spent the night in the hospital under observation. But again, with the reactions and the number of people that came out, again, a little creepy that they kept the cameras rolling all the way through to the back of the Performance Center in Orlando until they loaded her into an ambulance. So that's the kind of stuff that makes me uncomfortable and adds a little bit of fake to the whole thing, because I don't think this was fake. There was no point to it. Again, Mako Satomura did nothing other than, of course, during the match, maybe a kick or two landed a little bit harder than they should have. And maybe Roxanne Perez was concussed. But it didn't seem like it was staged. It really didn't. So we all hope that Roxanne Perez is okay. One of those scary moments. You can almost equate it to what happened to a point. Okay, don't go crazy with me here. To a point, you can compare it to what happened to the Buffalo Bills' Damar Hamlin towards the end of the NFL season. All right, so that's going to do it for segment 2 here on the weekend edition with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Segment 3 is coming up. I have a review of God's Country, based on a short story from the great James Lee Burke, starring Thandaway Newton. Then, of course, we will cover our moments of silence. And yes, we have a bunch of Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. It's a shame the Conquistador isn't here to play, dumbass or not, but we'll get through. And it just seems like there are a lot more dumbasses here on the weekend edition than we're getting out of the world of sports in our regular midweek sports edition. But again, that's Hollywood for you, and politics. No shortage of idiots, no shortage of dumbasses in this day and age. Quick promo coming, and I will be right back. Hello, this is Will Smith. You might know me as the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You might also know me from Bad Boys 1, Bad Boys 2, and Bad Boys for Life. And now you must also know me as an Academy Award-winning actor for King Richard. Also by now, you know there are two things I do not like people talking about in my presence. Namely, my open marriage and my wife's lack of hair. Well, now there is a third thing you do not talk about in front of Will Smith. You do not talk about Sports Frenzy 2.0. My boys, Kevin Dave, will hit slap the sports world in Hollywood each and every week on Sports Frenzy 2.0 and the Weekend Edition on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, and Stitcher. Just remember, keep Sports Frenzy's name out your damn mouth. All right, everybody, time for the third and final segment here. Saturday morning, March the 11th, 2023. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, getting you through Saturday morning after a rough Friday night. You can make it through the rest of the weekend. You can do it. If it's bad weather, bad memories from Friday, we'll get you through it. We've talked about music. We've talked about TV and streaming. Now it's time to give you a movie review. We have got a couple Clint Eastwood badasses of the week to catch up on. Moments of silence, and of course, the Red Foreman dumbasses of the week. But first, normally we do this in segment 2. We're going to do it here now. You found us somewhere. Just want to let you know you have options. You can find the weekend edition of Sports Frenzy 2.0 on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and Audible. And of course, you can always find a link to every new episode on our Facebook page. All right, so let's get into our movie review of the week. God's Country. God's Country is based on a short story by my favorite author, James Lee Burke. Now, by my count, this is the third major motion picture based on one of his books or stories. Of course, we have had Heaven's Prisoners starring Alec Baldwin, In the Electric Mist with Tommy Lee Jones, and now God's Country, based on his short story Winter Light, which is less than 30 pages long, bear in mind, as we get through this review. Now, in a sense, God's Country, even though it was written a long, long time ago, again, as Winter Light, it's a perfect fit for our times. Now, I'm not going to build this movie up too much because I do have issues and problems with it, but I will say this. In the current climate, politically, socially, you look at what gets nominated for Best Picture for the Oscars, I am surprised and shocked that God's Country was not a more serious contender for major awards. And I don't know why. I would love to talk to some film critics and find out why, because in many ways, again, this film is perfect as a commentary on our times. Mostly good, a little bit bad. God's Country stars Thandaway Newton, one of my favorite actresses. Now, in Winter Light, the protagonist was a male. I think it works better having a female protagonist in this role. And it really is a compliment to the filmmakers that they were able to take, again, a short story, less than 30 pages, keep the spirit of that story intact, which they did beautifully, yet still expand on it and add extra menace, extra tension, extra layers. Now, here's my problems with it. This is why, as I sit here and I heap praise upon God's Country and talk about how it should have been nominated for Best Picture, and you have to take that in perspective because I'm usually not a fan of most of the movies that are nominated by the Academy for Best Picture. Now, this year is an exception. We've talked about The Banshees of Inisherin. Great movie. You guys like Top Gun Maverick? I thought it was eh. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Gotta watch it again. Gotta watch it again. That's all I can say. One time was not enough to fully figure it out, to understand it. But again, that's more praise for this year's crop of movies than I've given for probably the last 5 years combined. And again, I don't understand how God's Country slipped through the cracks. This is a powerful movie about escalation and how we have to look at ourselves in the mirror. And we have to realize that maybe sometimes if we get pushed, we don't push back. And if we do push back, we better expect to get pushed back a hell of a lot harder because we don't know who we're dealing with. Now, I'll give you the bare bones basics without spoiling anything for you. Anyway, Newton plays a college professor in Montana, living remotely out in the middle of a beautiful, beautiful patch of acreage in the mountains out there. Runs into a couple good old boys who decide that they have every right to park on her land and go hunting. And of course, as I mentioned, you can see what's coming, escalation. And that's how the short story works as well. In the end, in this movie, nobody, in my opinion, is absolved. There are no characters to really root for in this movie. And again, I'm shocked because that's usually the type of thing Hollywood eats up. And again, for the most part, in this case, in God's Country, it works. Now, there are a lot of people with blinders on who would say, how can you say that about the poor female college professor? She's as much of the problem as anybody else in the movie. And I think that's what makes the movie more powerful, at least from my perspective. Is that, again, nobody to root for. No good guys, no bad guys. Everybody's kind of bad, misguided, flawed. And it's, again, a beautiful reflection on our day and age. I guess beautiful might not be the best word, but do you always need to push back when somebody says, hey, you're on my property? Could you just find somewhere else to go hunting? Or if you're on the other side, do you end up stalking and menacing these hunters because you're obsessed, because you've gone through personal trauma in your life and you can't let it go? And it's a character flaw on your part. Again, it's very hard for me to go over the top with my praise on God's Country because, again, almost all the characters are unlikable, flawed, but it is so well done. And again, based on a kernel, a nugget, a brilliant idea from my man James Lee Burke, God's Country gets 3 frenzies from me. And again, I wonder why it didn't get more recognition when it comes down to it from the Academy Award panel. All right, so let's move along to what we do each and every week here at the end of the weekend edition. First up, moments of silence. Those who have left us in the world of entertainment. Of course, the great actor, troubled actor, we all know he had issues, he had problems, but he was intense and he was fantastic in movies like Saving Private Ryan and Heat. Tom Sizemore unfortunately passed away. We had discussed how he had a brain aneurysm and was in a coma, and it was only a matter of time. But I personally love Tom Sizemore as an actor. I love these wild card actors. Mickey Rourke. And I'm not saying I love the way they live their lives. Of course, I would prefer that they had a cleaner lifestyle. Let's put it that way. But of course, the cliche goes, there is a fine line between genius and insanity. And there's a reason why we have these cliches, because really they're true. They've been proven to be true. And we know with Hollywood, it's definitely the case. The egos, the pressure, the constant attention, depends on how you handle it. And at times, Tom Sizemore did not handle it very well. But again, his work on the silver screen was fantastic. In music, a name that you might recognize if you're more of an old school music fan like me, David Lindley passed away. Most notably, Jackson Browne's guitarist through his most popular years in the late 70s into the early 80s. And then, of course, the last surviving member, the original surviving member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, has passed away. Gary Rosington. Again, something that's not shocking in that we're dealing with somebody who had health issues, heart issues here over the past few years. Right now, the band does not know if they're going to continue. Technically, they have been kind of, sort of on a farewell tour. But now without Gary Rosington, who knows? Who knows if they'll finish up the dates that they've got set here in 2023 or if they're going to call it quits. And then finally, Fiddler on the Roof. Classic musical, stage play. And I'm going to do my best with the name here, so please don't hate me or berate me. I'm going to say it's Kaim Topal. who played Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, the main character of Fiddler on the Roof, has passed away. Now, before we pivot and get to our Red Foreman dumbasses of the week, and we've got a lot again, it's Hollywood, it's politics, I feel the need to catch up and try to do some positives. I did this earlier this week with our sports edition. Of course, Sports Frenzy 2.0 started off exclusively as a sports show on cable access in the early 90s. You can check out our sports edition every Thursday morning. But just like I did with the sports edition, I need to catch up. I need to get some positive stuff in here. So I have not done much since we instituted the Clint Eastwood Badasses of the Week a few months ago. So let's start off with South Park. Of course, Trey Parker, Matt Stone, the creative minds behind that ridiculously successful, long-running, brilliant show. And I'll admit, I didn't give up on it. I have not given up on South Park. I don't know why I don't watch it right now. I couldn't tell you a really good reason, especially considering the wasteland that a lot of TV and streaming is right now. I always think back to the great Bruce Springsteen song, 57 Channels and Nothing On. But again, in the fractured attention span day and age we live in, you got to be in the right mood for the right thing. But this makes me want to jump back in and start watching South Park again. How they recently just brilliantly skewered the egomaniacs, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Now, I've seen clips of this episode, which recently aired. And of course, the butthurt royals, and I will say the butthurt royals, can't handle it. Seriously, you want to talk about snowflakes? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are if you look up snowflake in the dictionary, you should see pictures of these two morons. So, my Clint Eastwood Badasses of the Week, part one, are the guys from South Park for brilliantly skewering the egomaniacal Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Now, I'm going back about a month here for the next one. And it's not necessarily a profound badass, but I like it when somebody in the acting world, the Hollywood realm, steps out of line and says, hey, I'm not going to follow in step with what you want me to be. I'm not going to be a lemming for you. Now, I don't know. This is a show that I really want to watch, but I'm not getting Apple Plus just for this show. But Slow Horses, the show featuring Gary Oldman, another one of my favorite actors. Actor named Jack Lowden is in Slow Horses with Gary Oldman. And he basically came out, he didn't overstate it, but in very simple terms said, you're not an actor when you're sort of political. And again, not an overwhelming scream it from the rooftop, scream it from the top of the mountain type of statement, but at least he seems like he gets it. He gets it in that Actors aren't political geniuses. Actors are not walking around with master's degrees in political science or government. That's why when we hear somebody like Whoopi Goldberg tell us how to think and how to feel, we should say, hell no, fuck you. And that's why Whoopi is on standby on the Sports Frenzy Plane of Doom. And she waves through the terminal window at her buddy, who is firmly entrenched, seat belted in, Joy Behar, on the Plane of Doom. You don't know more than the rest of us. You don't, and you never will. You won't learn. You won't grow. You're stagnant, you're stupid, and you're idiots. So once again, good for Mr. Loudon. Good for Jack Loudon to step up and in a very subtle way say, stay out of politics, you're an actor. Now, finally, I'm going to transition here from the badasses to the dumbasses. I had a similar thing happen again on the sports edition this week. Now, initially, when I heard this, I wanted to say, and I still will stick with it, that Idris Elba gets it. Idris Elba is a badass. Because we know, we've heard rumors for years and years about Idris Elba. He should be James Bond. He should be the next James Bond. He should be James Bond. And again, he takes everything with grace, dignity, maturity. Now, of course, his character, his main character, Luther, brand new movie on Netflix as they continue that story, is Luther, the fallen son. And there is a joke in it where at one point Luther turns down the offer of a martini. As we all know, that is the preferred drink of 1007. So again, Idris Elba, being the badass that he is, handles it the right way, kind of says, yeah, maybe it was a little bit of a wink to the whole Bond thing. So again, he handles it with respect and maturity. Now, the creator of this movie, of Luther, Neil Cross, of course, can't help but be a dumbass. So here we go. We're transitioning from badasses to dumbasses in the same story. Neil Cross is a dumbass because he, of course, says, number one, Luther is better. The series that he's created is better than James Bond. Okay, tone down the ego about 500%, okay, dude? You don't want to go there. And then number two, he says the martini joke, which again, Idris Elba handles gracefully. Neil Cross says is a middle finger to James Bond. So let's see. Who is the mature man who we would want to hang out with, have a drink with, even if it's not a martini? Who's a badass, a cool dude, and who's a little petulant, woke brat? You tell me, kids. All I know is Neil Cross is a dumbass. So now we get fully into the dumbasses of the week. Brian Eno. I've never understood this guy. As much as I get into music, as much as I have been into music, for the majority of my life, 45 years of my life, I have been devoted to music. Yes, and I know he's got the reputation. He helped produce U2 in their glory years. But now Brian Eno says the Earth will be his co-writer when it comes to his music from now on. And of course, this is some kind of a snowflake ploy. So the royalties from his music will somehow get around to going to organizations fighting climate change. And again, that's not necessarily a terrible purpose. But why do you have to be so melodramatic about it and be such a dumbass about it? Number one, I don't know anybody who really listens to Brian Eno's music. Again, he made his mark as a producer of U2. His music, I don't know anybody that's listened to any of it. And again, making the Earth your co-writer just so you can get the royalties to these groups, there are going to be a lot more hoops you're going to have to jump through when you do it this way. You would have been better off just writing a check out of your bank account and giving it to the organizations of your choice than to doing this dumbass egotistical move by making the Earth my co-writer. Dumbass. All right, let's go down south. Let's go down to Florida for a couple dumbasses. We know Florida politics are a mess, for better or for worse. Some people say Florida right now is the model for how our country should be run. Others say it's a complete and total disaster. So let's just kind of delve in here and point out some of the idiocy going on in Florida. First up, Florida Senator Jason Brodeur has proposed a new state bill. You want to talk about censorship. I hate censorship, and we'll talk more about it in a couple minutes here. Senator Brodeur, again, state senator, says that bloggers who gain income and then speak badly about any public figure have to register with the state and disclose the source of their income for their blog. That sounds like communism. That sounds like China, Russia. You do not disparage the rulers. You do not disparage the state. Is that what Florida's coming to under Ron DeSantis? And believe me, I like Ron DeSantis, but he better get this guy in line and say, this is too much. You are censoring free speech by doing this in so many ways. You should be able to say your opinion on a blog, even if it's talking about politics in your state, without having to register and disclose the sources of your income. That's paranoia. That is massive paranoia on a ridiculous level. Jason Brodeur is a dumbass. And, send me a bill for saying that, dude, okay? Guess what? Last time I checked Sports Frenzy's coffers, they're pretty dry. So you come get my money. Oh, let's stick with Florida. And this looks like a misstep on the part of the aforementioned Ron DeSantis. Now, we talked recently, maybe we didn't. I can't remember if we brought this up about Florida taking over an area of Walt Disney World that they were allowed to self-govern. Now Florida is taking it back. But the panel that is going to oversee this area of Walt Disney World. One of the members is one particular Ron Perry, Peri, appointed by Ron DeSantis. And this guy's a piece of work. And again, this does not look good for Governor DeSantis. Ron Perry once implied that because birth control pills were getting flushed down the toilet or making their way in somehow, some way, bodily fluids, I don't know how, but birth control pills and the estrogen were making their way into the tap water, and they were turning, the water was turning men into homosexuals. You can't make this kind of stupidity up. You can't. You just can't. Yes, Ron Perry, who is currently on the panel, appointed by Ron DeSantis to oversee portions of Walt Disney World, once implied that the tap water was turning men gay. What a dumbass. Let's stick with Disney, though. Let's go out west, though. Let's go out to Disneyland. We knew this was probably coming. I am surprised it didn't happen sooner. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about censorship here in the last few minutes. We have got to acknowledge the good and the bad in our history. We've got to learn from the good and the bad. Censoring, changing, rewriting, tearing statues down is not the way to solve the problem. And of course, we all know one of the first moves that Hollywood and pop culture made years and years, decades ago, was to basically erase the classic Disney movie Song of the South. And again, I am shocked that this did not happen until now. But in Disneyland, finally, because they think this is genius and this is brilliant, removing the phrase zippity-doo-dah, which of course was part of a song in Song of the South, will now be removed from all in-park parades. Because zippity-doo-dah, that implies slavery. That implies the mistreatment of black people. Jesus God, when will this ever end? And of course, we know that they shut down Splash Mountain because that was tied into Song of the South. So you can't even have Brer Rabbit or Brer Bear because, again, indirectly, by association, they're guilty of racism. These characters from a movie are guilty of racism by association. How unbelievably fucking stupid is this? And I'm telling you what, I'm getting to the point where I'm going to start walking around whistling zippity-doo-dah. Because if that's what it takes to trigger people, then we are so far gone, we will never get back. Now we got a controversy involving more book editing. We have talked about in recent weeks Roald Dahl and James Bond. The estate of Roald Dahl, the estate of Ian Fleming, both letting sensitivity readers recommend changes to the text in classic books from those authors. Now it comes out that Goosebumps, a more recent example, Of course, I remember when I worked in a bookstore in the early 90s, Goosebumps were huge. But now they are going to be editing the Goosebumps books to, of course, be more inclusive. Now, here's the funny thing. The initial story I saw, I guess it's not funny, it's sad. The initial story I saw about this said that R.L. Stine, the author, had approved these edits. And now I have heard today, as I tape here on March the 9th, 2023, that is not the case, that this was done behind the back of the author by the publisher. R.L. Stine did not approve these changes. So we'll see where this goes. But somewhere, somehow, probably the publisher, dumbass. Stop censorship. Stop censorship. It's called free speech. It's our First Amendment right. And then finally, poor Seth Rogen. One of the most overrated hacks of the last couple decades in movies. Now, I'll admit, I liked Pineapple Express and I liked The Interview. But for the most part, Seth Rogen's movies are crap on toast. And I know he produced things behind the scenes like Preacher on FX, which was great. And so I'm not saying the guy is talentless, but he's not, I don't know, insert your favorite director. He's not David Fincher. He's not Martin Scorsese. He's not Steven Spielberg. Seth Rogen came out here and said, critics don't understand how hurtful bad reviews are for filmmakers. They can be devastating. It's very personal when you attack somebody's work. Grow up. Grow a pair, Seth. And I want my money back for This Is the End, that piece of garbage. Why don't you do another movie with Barbara Streisand that fails miserably? Or do another movie with Charlize Theron that fails miserably? Seth Rogen, the ultimate snowflake. Oh, you trigger us when you give us bad reviews. Don't give us... So now we're supposed to give everybody great reviews so your feelings don't get hurt? You wuss. You're a dumbass. All right, that's going to do it for Sports Frenzy's Weekend Edition. Hopefully Dave will be back with me next week. I'm the Maestro. We'll see you later.